At 63, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I'd survived a difficult divorce, weathered the storm of an empty nest, and even faced the whispers when I was passed over for promotion because women my age weren't dynamic enough. But nothing prepared me for opening that beautifully wrapped birthday gift from my estranged son cookies that contained enough poison to kill me. The irony. By giving them away to my former mother-in-law, I accidentally saved my own life and discovered a truth more bitter than any poison. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, because every woman deserves to know how quickly the people closest to us can become strangers, and how even at our age, we can find the strength to start again when our world shatters. My name is Quinley Blackwood, and today is my birthday. 3 years ago, my son decided I no longer deserved a place in his life. No explanation. No argument that I can remember. Just silence that fell between us like a heavy curtain, impossible to push aside. I ran my finger along the rim of my coffee mug, watching the sunlight catch the chipped edge. 3 years without a call. Not even a card when I had pneumonia last winter. Nothing when my sister passed away 6 months ago. I'd gotten used to the silence. Or at least I told myself I had. The neighborhood was quiet this morning. Mrs. Abernathy across the street was watering her prize-winning roses. The Henderson boy rode past on his bicycle, tossing the newspaper with surprising accuracy onto my welcome mat. Normal, predictable, safe. Then came the knock. Not the impatient tap of the mailman or the neighbor kid selling coupon books. Just one knock. Then the sound of footsteps retreating. I waited, listening to the silence that followed. Before pushing myself up from the swing, the package sat on my doormat. Plain brown paper, carefully taped, a thin blue ribbon tied once around the middle. There was no doubt about the handwriting. I hadn't seen it in 3 years, but I would have known it with my eyes closed. Thaddeus wrote like a blueprint, precise. No wasted curves, always in blue ink. I picked up the package and tested its weight in my hands. Not heavy, but substantial. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there, barefoot on the doormat, staring at the neat letters spelling out my name, Quinley Blackwood. I whispered it under my breath, like it might sound different, somehow coming from him. Back inside, I set the package on the kitchen table. The coffee had gone cold. I reheated it and sat down, folding my hands in my lap like I was waiting to be called on. After 3 years of silence, not even a call when I had pneumonia, not a word when my sister passed away. Now this. Eventually, curiosity won. Inside the paper was a white box, and inside that, nestled in tissue like they were fragile, were cookies. Dozens of them, carefully iced, each one different. Blue flowers, golden leaves, stars with sugar dust, all handmade. Thaddeus had never baked a day in his life. No note except a small card taped to the inside of the lid. Happy birthday, Mom. Let's start over. I held the card like it might vanish if I blinked. My throat tightened. Not quite a lump, just that soft ache that creeps in when you want something to be real, but don't trust it yet. The cookies looked perfect. Too perfect. Each one decorated with an almost surgical precision, just like Thaddeus himself, always precise, always perfect, never a hair out of place, never a wrinkle in his shirts. Even as a child, I didn't eat them. I wanted to, but I didn't. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was fear, or maybe it was something quieter, something I couldn't name but didn't want to ignore. I slipped one cookie to star with delicate silver dust into a small Tupperware container, sealed it, and placed it in the fridge. The rest I rewrapped carefully. I wasn't sure why I kept that one cookie separate. A mother's intuition, perhaps, or simply a desire to save something from this unexpected olive branch. My phone rang, startling me. For a wild moment, I thought it might be Thaddeus, but the screen showed Meridian Satterfield's name, my former daughter-in-law's mother. She'd always been good to me, especially when Thaddeus got distant. Quinley, her warm voice filled my kitchen. Happy birthday, dear. Thank you, Meridian. I smiled despite myself. How are you? Oh, busy as ever. The church fundraiser is tomorrow, and I'm still short on desserts. These young people volunteer and then forget. She sighed in that good-natured way of hers. I don't suppose you'd have time to bake something. I looked at the box of cookies on my table. Actually, I said slowly, I might have something for you. After speaking with Meridian, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the box of cookies. Why now, after 3 years of silence? Why reach out on my birthday and with cookies? Of all things, the Thaddeus I knew didn't bake. He barely cooked. When he was a child, he refused to even touch dough or batter, saying it was unpredictable and messy. Yet here were these perfectly decorated cookies, each one a small work of art. I ran my fingers over the blue ribbon, remembering. Thaddeus at 8, folding dinner napkins with geometric precision, refolding any that weren't perfectly square. Thaddeus at 10, throwing a tantrum when I rearranged the pantry by color instead of size, screaming until his face turned purple. Thaddeus at 12, refusing to speak to me for a full week and after I forgot to use the right brand of ketchup on his sandwich. Back then, I'd called them quirks. Said he was particular, sensitive, brilliant in school, obedient in public, a model child on paper. But I remembered too the way he watched people eat, watched me. That time I baked cookies with walnuts by mistake, and he spit one into the trash, then scrubbed his mouth until his lips bled. The way he went completely still when disappointed, like he was storing it for later. I opened the fridge and looked at the single cookie I'd set aside. Something didn't feel right. Call it maternal instinct or plain old suspicion, but I couldn't bring myself to try one. Not yet. I needed to understand why they had arrived now, after so long. My cell phone chimed with a text from Evanora, Thaddeus's wife of 7 years. We'd once been close, before the estrangement. Happy birthday. Quinley, hope you're well. T says he sent something your way. No mention of what it was. No offer to visit, just acknowledgement that a gift had been sent. I texted back a simple thank you and set the phone down. It was then that I made my decision. I would keep the one cookie to examine more closely later and take the rest to Meridian for her church fundraiser. If Thaddeus truly wanted to reconnect, this would be just the first step. And if there was something more behind this gift, well, I wasn't ready to face that possibility yet. I carefully rewrapped the box, retying the blue ribbon with hands that weren't quite steady. As I did, I noticed something I'd missed before, a faint, powdery residue on my fingertips where I'd handled one of the cookies. I washed my hands immediately, watching the water swirl down the drain. Before I left, I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. 63 years old today. Silver hair cut in a practical bob, lines around my eyes that deepened when I smiled. I didn't look like someone's enemy. I didn't look like someone who deserved 3 years of silence. I didn't look like someone who should be afraid of her own son. Meridian Satterfield lived just 15 minutes away, in a modest ranch-style house with wind chimes hanging from every available hook on the front porch. When I pulled into her driveway, the sun was low enough to cast that soft orange light across the trees, and her wind chimes were already dancing in the afternoon breeze. I sat in my car for a moment, the box of cookies on the passenger seat. Was I doing the right thing? Should I just throw them away instead? But that seemed wasteful. And if Thaddeus truly had innocent intentions, I'd be throwing away a chance to heal our relationship. Meridian opened her front door before I'd even reached the porch. Quinley, she beamed, arms outstretched. Come in, come in. I've just made tea. Meridian was everything I wasn't: effusive, tactile, perpetually cheerful. Her silver hair was long and often braided, her clothes flowing and colorful. Today she wore a turquoise caftan with silver embroidery that caught the light. Happy birthday, she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender and cinnamon. 63. Yes, a wonderful age. Thank you, I said, returning her hug with one arm, the other still holding the box. I brought those desserts we talked about. Her eyebrows rose when she saw the carefully wrapped box. Oh my, how lovely. You didn't need to go to all this trouble. Actually, Buansu, I hesitated, then decided on honesty. They're from Thaddeus. He sent them for my birthday. Meridian's smile faltered for just a moment. Did he now? That's unexpected. We moved to her kitchen, a warm space filled with plants and handmade pottery. She set the kettle to boil again and gestured for me to sit at the round oak table. How long has it been since you've heard from him? She asked, taking cups from the cabinet. 3 years. I said not a word. Then this morning, this package arrives. Meridian placed a hand on my shoulder. And how do you feel about that? Confused. Hopeful? Suspicious? I shrugged. All of the above. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Meridian had her own complicated relationship with Thaddeus. Though she was Evanora's mother, she'd never quite warmed to my son, sensing something in him that others missed. And these cookies, she asked, eyeing the box. You haven't tried them. I shook my head. I kept one, but I don't know. It felt strange to just accept this peace offering without understanding why now. Meridian's eyes narrowed slightly. You know, Evanora called me last week. She sounded not herself. Oh, I straightened, instantly alert. What did she say? Nothing specific, just that Thaddeus has been different lately, more secretive, spending hours in his study. She found some strange books hidden behind his usual medical references, books about plants. She said, the kettle whistled, and Meridian turned to prepare the tea. I sat very still, processing her words. Thaddeus was a pharmaceutical researcher. Plants and compounds were his professional domain. But why hide books, and why would that concern Evanora? Did she say what kind of plants? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Meridian set a steaming cup before me. Medicinal, I think, or maybe poisonous. You know how those categories overlap? She waved a hand. I'm sure it's nothing, just related to his work. Probably, pso. I agreed, but something cold had settled in my stomach. We chatted about other things than the church fundraiser, Meridian's garden, my part-time job at the local library. Normal things, safe things, but the box of cookies between us like a question neither of us quite wanted to ask. When I finally rose to leave, Meridian took the box with genuine thanks. These will be perfect for the bake sale table. I'll make sure they're displayed prominently. At the door, she held my hands in hers. Quinley, she said, her voice serious now, be careful. I'm not saying Thaddeus means you harm, but this sudden reappearance after so long, it's odd. I know, I said. That's why I brought you the cookies. Her eyes widened slightly. Then she nodded, understanding. I'll call you tomorrow after the fundraiser, let you know how they were received. Driving home, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd passed a burden to someone else. It wasn't until I was halfway home that guilt crept in. What if I was wrong? What if the cookies were simply a genuine peace offering, and I'd given them away instead of accepting them in the spirit intended? But then I remembered the powdery residue on my fingers, and Evanora's concern about hidden books, and Thaddeus's childhood habit of storing slights for later revenge. The single cookie waited in my refrigerator, like evidence of a crime not yet committed. The next morning, I was halfway through pouring my second cup of coffee when the phone rang. The sound startled me. It had been a long time since anyone called this early, and longer still since that number flashed across the screen. Thaddeus. I didn't answer right away. My hand hovered over the phone like it might burn me. The call buzzed once more before I picked up. Hello. Hi, Mom. His voice, smooth and casual, slipped through the line like nothing had happened. Like 3 years of silence hadn't settled between us, like sediment. Happy birthday. A little late, I know. Thaddeus. I sat down slowly, gripping the mug with both hands. I got your package. Yeah, a soft chuckle. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure you would open it. Honestly. I did. It was unexpected. There was a beat of silence, and then he asked, a little too casually, "So, how were they?" "The cookies." I took a breath. "Oh, I didn't eat them." "What? Why not?" There was an edge to his voice now. "I gave them to Meridian for her church fundraiser." The line went dead quiet. I pulled the phone away from my ear to check if the call had dropped. It hadn't. "You gave them to Meridian?" His voice was different now, sharper. The warmth evaporated. "Yes," I said slowly. "She's always loved sweets. And I didn't know what to do with them." He didn't speak for a long moment. I could hear his breathing, tight and uneven, then quietly at first, but with building force. "You did what?" The words hit like a slap. I blinked, stunned. "Thaddeus, what's wrong?" "They weren't for her," he snapped. "They were for you. Only you." His voice cracked, not with sadness, but something else, frustration, maybe even panic. I couldn't tell. I sat frozen, the coffee cooling in my hands. "I didn't know," I said, my voice small. "Right. Of course you didn't." The bitterness bled through, thick and choking. "You never do." He hung up before I could say anything else. The dial tone hummed in my ear. I set the phone down slowly, staring at the counter. My heart thudded in my chest, not fast but deep, like it wanted to be heard. "Only you." That's what he'd said. I stood, walked to the fridge, and opened it. The small container was still there. One perfect cookie, untouched. I shut the fridge and leaned against the counter, suddenly cold. That's when the other phone rang the landline in the hallway. Almost no one used it anymore. I walked toward it, dread already spreading through me. The landline crackled when I picked it up, like the receiver had forgotten how to carry a voice. Quinley, it was Evanora, Thaddeus's wife. Her voice was strained, brittle. "Yes, Evanora, what's wrong?" But I already knew. Somehow. "It's Meridian. She's in the hospital." I sat down without meaning to, right there in the hallway. "What happened?" "She collapsed this morning, vomiting, disoriented. I thought it was the flu, but it got worse. She couldn't stand. She was confused." Evanora's voice caught. "The ER says they can't find anything definitive. They're running tests now." My mouth went dry. "Did she eat anything unusual?" A pause. "She mentioned cookies. Said you brought them over." "I did. I gave her the box Thaddeus sent me." Evanora didn't speak. I could hear hospital noises in the background. Monitors, heels on tile, a cart squeaking down a hall. "Do you think they could have made her sick?" she finally asked. I swallowed. "I don't know. I didn't eat any myself." Another silence. "If you think of anything, anything at all, you'll tell me." "Yes," I whispered. "Of course, Versi." We hung up, and I sat there in the dim light of the hallway, staring at the wall. The morning sun had faded behind clouds, leaving the living room in a dull haze. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't move for a long time. Later, after dark, I wandered into the kitchen with the aimless instinct of someone looking for order. I started cleaning, wiping down surfaces, folding towels that didn't need folding. I opened the trash to empty it and saw something near the bottom, a small, clear plastic bottle, like the kind vitamins come in. No label, just a faint ring of white powder clinging to the inside wall. I reached in and picked it up, turning it in my hands. It wasn't mine. I hadn't seen it before. The cap was still screwed on tight. I opened the fridge. The cookie was still there, tucked into its little container like it had been waiting for this moment. My hands shook as I lifted it out. I hadn't even remembered why I saved it. Something sweet for later. A small kindness for myself. Now I couldn't look at it without feeling sick. I carried the cookie and the empty bottle into the study and set them on the desk. The lamplight made the sugar crystals sparkle faintly. I sat down and folded my hands, staring at both like they might blink first. Was I the target? Was it meant for me? The questions hung there, too big to touch. Later, just before bed, I called the lab where Zephyrine Holloway worked. She owed me a favor from years ago, when I'd helped her son through a difficult time. I didn't say much, just that I needed something tested quietly. She said she could meet me in the morning. I hung up the phone and stood in the middle of the room for a long time before turning out the light. In the quiet, I could still hear Thaddeus's voice in my head. You did what the cookie stayed in the fridge that night. So did the dread. I'll now write part 2 of the story, continuing from where we left off, with approximately 4,000 words. The Gift of Poison. Part 2, Suspicion and Discovery. The lab was tucked behind a medical office complex on the edge of town, the kind of place you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. I parked in the back lot, away from the morning sun that was already heating the asphalt. Zephyrine Holloway came out herself to meet me, her lab coat too crisp for how early it was. At 61, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had earned every gray hair through hard-won expertise. Her dark eyes missed nothing, scanning my face with scientific precision. Quinley, she greeted me with a quick embrace. It's been too long. Thank you for doing this, I said, clutching my purse where I'd carefully placed the sealed container, with the cookie and the empty bottle. She led me through a side entrance, using her keycard to access a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and air conditioning. So, she said once we were alone in a small office, this is the kind of favor I'll regret. I tried to smile, but couldn't quite make it land. Just tell me what's in it. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. That was Zephyrine direct, practical, discreet. It's why I'd called her instead of going to the police with my suspicions. I needed to know first. I needed to be Trisby's. I placed the container and bottle on her desk. The cookie came from a package my son sent me for my birthday. His mother-in-law ate some similar ones and is now in the hospital. The bottle I found in my trash, it's not mine. Zephyrine expression didn't change, but her posture straightened. Symptoms: vomiting, disorientation, weakness. She nodded and picked up the container, examining the cookie without opening it. And you think these are connected? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I need to know. I'll run comprehensive panels, she said. All business now. It'll take a few hours. You want to wait? Or should I call you? I'll wait, I said, unable to imagine going home to an empty house with this hanging over me. She nodded and disappeared through the lab door with both items, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat in a chair by the window, watching the parking lot fill as the morning progressed. Nurses arriving for shifts, patients moving slowly toward appointments, normal life continuing while mine felt suspended. My phone buzzed. Evanora. Meridian stabilized overnight, but still no diagnosis. Doctors running more tests. Where are you? I hesitated, then typed, trying to find answers. I'll come to the hospital soon. I put the phone away and closed my eyes, memories flooding back unbidden. Thaddeus at 16, dissecting a frog at the kitchen table. His focus absolute, unmoved by the creature's recent life. Thaddeus at 18, receiving his college acceptance with a cold smile, telling me, now I'll learn things that actually matter. Thaddeus at 25, introducing one to Evanora with a hand on her lower back that looked more possessive than affectionate. Had I missed the signs? Had I chosen to ignore them, hoping that adulthood would smooth his sharp edges? Or had I simply loved him too much to see him clearly? Zephyrine returned just after noon, her face grave. She closed the door behind her and sat across from me. It's aconitum, she said without preamble. Monkshood, highly toxic. Quinley, definitely not something that belongs in food. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the arms of my chair. You're sure? I ran multiple tests. There's no mistake. She leaned forward. The concentration is significant enough to cause serious illness, possibly death in a vulnerable person. The residue in the bottle matches the compound in the cookie. I closed my eyes, absorbing the confirmation of my worst fears. My son had sent me poison in a gift box. a box I'd passed on like it was nothing. You said Meridian is in the hospital. Zephyrine voice cut through my shock. I nodded. They need to know what they're dealing with. Aconitine poisoning requires specific treatment. She was already reaching for the phone. I'll call Dr. Reeves directly. He'll know what to do without creating a panic. As she dialed, I sat frozen, the reality crashing over me in waves. Thaddeus had tried to poison me, had carefully decorated cookies with a deadly toxin and sent them as a birthday gift. The detail, the precision, the planning, all hallmarks of his personality, but turned to a purpose so dark I could barely comprehend it. Dr. Reeves will meet us at Luke's, Zephyrine said, hanging up. Bring the test results. I've documented everything. Us, I blinked, my mind still struggling to catch up. You don't think I'm letting you face this alone? Do you? She was already gathering her things. Quinley, this isn't just a family matter anymore. This is attempted murder. The word hung in the air between us, sharp and undeniable. What about the police? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. One step at a time, she said, Bud. First, we make sure Meridian gets the right treatment. Then we'll talk about next steps. I followed her to her car, moving through a fog of disbelief and betrayal. As we drove to St. Luke's, I kept seeing Thaddeus's face in my mind, not as the grown man who had sent me poison, but as the little boy who had once held my hand crossing the street, looking both ways with serious eyes. Where had that boy gone? And when had he decided I deserved to die, St. Luke's hospital rose like a pale monolith against the midday sky, its windows reflecting clouds and blue. The emergency entrance buzzed with controlled chaos, ambulances arriving, families waiting, staff moving with purposeful strides. Zephyrine led the way, her lab coat parting the crowd like a white flag. At the nurse's station, she asked for Dr. Reeves, who appeared moments later, a tall man with prematurely silver hair and alert eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Zeph, he greeted her, then turned to me. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm Nathan Reeves, toxicology specialist. Please call me Quinley, I said automatically, shaking his offered hand. I've reviewed the preliminary findings, he said. All efficiency. We're adjusting Mrs. Satterfield's treatment now. The good news is that aconitine poisoning, when identified quickly, can be managed effectively. Will she be okay? I asked, the guilt pressing on my chest like a stone. I believe so. The symptoms presented early enough for intervention. He glanced at Zephyrine. Your analysis likely saved us precious time. Not my analysis. Zephyrine nodded toward me. Quinley's suspicion. She brought me the sample. Peter, Reeves's gaze sharpened. And you suspect your son deliberately poisoned these cookies. I flinched at the bluntness, but nodded. I can't think of any other explanation. Have you spoken with him since discovering this? Only briefly before I knew what was in the cookies. He was angry that I'd given them away instead of eating them myself. Reeves exchanged a look with Zephyrine. Mrs. Blackwood, Quinley, I believe we should involve the authorities. This goes beyond a medical issue. I know, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. But first, I'd like to see Meridian. He hesitated, then nodded. Of course. 4th floor, room 412. Her daughter is with her. The elevator ride was silent, each of us lost in thought. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, I nearly collided with Evanora, who was pacing the hallway. Quinley, her face registered surprise, then relief, then suspicion as she noticed Zephyrine. Who's this, Dr. Holloway? Zephyrine introduced herself. I've been helping your mother-in-law with some tests. Evanora's eyes darted between us. Test? What kind of test? I took a deep breath. Evanora, we need to talk somewhere private. Her face paled. Is it about my mother? Do you know what's wrong with her? Yes, I said gently, and she's going to be okay. But what I have to tell you is difficult. We found an empty waiting room at the end of the hall. Evanora sat perched on the edge of a chair, her designer handbag clutched tightly in her lap. At 35, she looked both younger and older than her age, smooth-skinned, but with eyes that had seen too much. "The cookies made your mother sick," I began, choosing my words carefully. "They contained a toxic substance called aconitine, derived from monkshood." Evanora's expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened around her bag. "That's not possible. Those cookies came from Thaddeus." "Yes," I said. "They did." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched comprehension dawn slowly on her face, followed by denial, then horror. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be right. Thaddeus wouldn't, he couldn't." Holloway confirmed it," I said, gesturing to Zephyrinson. "And I found an empty bottle in my trash that contained traces of the same substance." Evanora's breathing quickened. "This is insane. You're saying my husband tried to poison you?" "The evidence suggests—" "What evidence?" she snapped, color flooding back to her face. "A cookie, a bottle that could have come from anywhere. Do you know what you're accusing him of?" "Evanora," I kept my voice gentle, "you called me yourself about the strange books he's been hiding, about how different he's been acting." She flinched. "That doesn't mean he's a poisoner. The doctors are changing your mother's treatment based on this information." Zephyrin interjected calmly. "It will help her recover more quickly." Evanora stood abruptly. "I need to call Thaddeus. He needs to know what you're saying about him." "Evanora, wait." But she was already pulling out her phone, stepping away from us, her fingers trembling as she dialed. Zephyrin and I exchanged worried glances. "Should we stop her?" I whispered. "It might be better to let this play out." Zephyrin replied quietly, "If he knows we're on to him, he'll be careful about what he says and does." We watched as Evanora spoke into the phone, her back to us, her free hand gesturing sharply. I couldn't hear her words, but her body language shifted from defensive to confused to still. When she turned back to us, her face had drained of color. "He hung up," she said, her voice hollow. "I told him about the poisoning diagnosis, and he asked if you were here." She swallowed hard. "When I said yes, he just hung up." I felt a chill run through me. "Evanora, I think we should call the police." She stared at her phone, then at me, conflict playing across her features. "I've been married to him for 7 years," she said slowly. "I thought I knew him." "Sometimes," I said gently. "We see what we want to see in the people we love." Her eyes filled with tears. "I need to check on my mother." As she left, Zephyrin touched my arm. "I'll speak with hospital security. If Thaddeus decides to come here, they should be prepared." I nodded, suddenly exhausted. The weight of the morning's discoveries pressed down on me, making every movement an effort. "I'll stay with Meridian," I told her. "It's the least I can do." Meridian's room was dim and quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. She lay propped against white pillows, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, making her look older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. She smiled weakly when I entered. "Quinlay, you came." I took her hand, fighting back tears. "Meridian, I'm so sorry. The cookies." "Shh." She squeezed my fingers. "Evanora told me, it's not your fault." "It is," I insisted. "I should have known something wasn't right. I should never have brought them to you. And then it would be you in this bed," she said simply. "Or worse." The truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. If I had eaten those cookies as Thaddeus intended, I might not have survived long enough for anyone to identify the poison. "The doctors say I'll recover," Meridian continued. "And now we know what we're dealing with, who we're dealing with." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Have you called the police?" she asked. "Not yet. Everything's happened so fast." She frowned. "You must. Quinley, he can't be allowed to try again." "I know," I whispered. "I will." We sat in silence for a while, the gravity of the situation settling around us like dust. My son, whom I had carried and raised and loved, had tried to kill me, and in failing, had nearly killed someone else. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. I need to see you. Alone. Come home. My heart stuttered in my chest. I showed the message to Meridian, whose eyes widened. You can't go, she said immediately. It's too dangerous. If I don't, he might disappear, I reasoned, though fear coursed through me. At least this way, the police will know where to find him. Then call them first, she insisted. Don't face him alone. Quinley, I nodded, though a part of me, the mother part that never quite dies, wanted to see him one more time, wanted to ask why, wanted to understand how the boy I raised had become someone capable of such calculated cruelty. As I left Meridian's room, I nearly collided with a man in a crisp suit, his badge already extended. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm Detective Atreus Hollister. Dr. Reeves suggested I speak with you about a potential poisoning case. Relief washed over me. Yes, I said. I believe my son tried to poison me, and instead poisoned his mother-in-law. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. I understand you have evidence. Yes. I glanced at my phone, the text message still open. And I think he wants to meet me. Now. Detective Hollister led me to a small office borrowed from hospital administration. Unlike the stark interrogation rooms you see on television, this space was decorated with bland, watercolor paintings and fake plants, an attempt at comfort that somehow made everything more surreal. Dr. Holloway has shared her findings with us, he began, setting a digital recorder on the desk between us. I'd like to get your statement about the events leading up to Miss Satterfield's hospitalization. For the next hour, I recounted everything: the years of estrangement, the birthday package, my decision to keep one cookie and give the rest away, Thaddeus's angry call, finding the bottle in my trash, and his text message asking me to meet him at home. Detective Hollister took notes on a yellow legal pad, his handwriting surprisingly neat. He didn't interrupt, didn't show disbelief or judgment. He simply listened. And in your opinion, he asked when I'd finished, what would be your son's motive for wanting to harm you? The question hit me like cold water. In all the shock and fear, I hadn't really considered why. Why would Thaddeus want me dead after 3 years of silence? I'm not sure, I admitted. We've been estranged, but there was no specific falling out. Nothing I can point to and say, that's when it all went wrong. No financial considerations: property, inheritance, insurance. I started to shake my head, then stopped. Actually, I own my house outright. It's worth quite a bit now, with the real estate market what it is, and there's my retirement fund. It's not enormous, but it's substantial. And who stands to inherit? Thaddeus is my only child, I said slowly. There's no one else. Detective Hollister nodded, making another note. Is your son experiencing financial difficulties that you know of? I don't know. We haven't spoken in 3 years. I hesitated, then added, but Evanora mentioned he's been acting strangely lately, more secretive. We'll look into that, he said, then shifted gears. Now, about this text message. I don't want you meeting him alone, but this could be an opportunity to gather more evidence. My heart rate quickened. What are you suggesting? A controlled meeting. You'd wear a wire and we'd have officers nearby. He held up a hand as I started to protest. You wouldn't be in any danger. We'd be monitoring the entire time and could intervene instantly if needed. You want me to get him to confess? I said, understanding dawning. If possible, any admission about the cookies, the poison, his intentions, it would strengthen our case considerably. I thought about it, picturing myself face to face with Thaddeus, knowing what I now knew. Could I do it? Could I look into the eyes of my only child and try to extract a confession that would send him to prison? What about the evidence you already have? I asked. The cookie, the bottle, the lab results. They're compelling, he acknowledged. But defense attorneys can create reasonable doubt. Maybe the bottle wasn't his. Maybe the cookies were contaminated after they left his possession. A confession removes that doubt. I took a deep breath. What would I need to do? Detective Hollister outlined the plan. I would respond to Thaddeus's text agreeing to meet at my house in 2 hours. Before I arrived, police technicians would set up surveillance equipment and wire me for sound. Officers would be stationed nearby, monitoring everything. Your safety is the priority, he emphasized. If at any point you feel threatened, use the phrase, I need to sit down. That's our signal to intervene immediately. I nodded, fear and resolve warring within me. And if he confesses, we'll have it on record and we'll arrest him on the spot. As Detective Hollister left to make arrangements, I sat alone in the borrowed office, staring at my hands. They looked older than I remembered, the veins more prominent, the skin thinner. These hands had once cradled Thaddeus as a newborn, had guided his first steps, had wiped away tears and applied bandages and turned pages of bedtime stories. Now they would help send him to prison. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Thaddeus. Are you coming? I need to explain. With trembling fingers, I typed, I'll be there in 2 hours. We need to talk. His response came almost immediately. Thank you. Come alone. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. Memories washing over me unbidden. Thaddeus at 5, presenting me with a drawing of our house, every window and door meticulously placed. Thaddeus at 13, explaining a complex science concept with patience unusual for his age. Thaddeus at 21, standing tall in his graduation gown, a rare, genuine smile on his face as he accepted his diploma. Where had it all gone wrong? Had the capacity for such calculated cruelty always been there? Or had something broken inside him over time? And why hadn't I seen it coming? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Evanora stood in the doorway, her face drawn with exhaustion and shock. May I come in? She asked, her voice small. I nodded, and she took the seat Detective Hollister had vacated. I've been sitting with Mom, she said. The doctors say the new treatment is working. Her vitals are improving. I'm so glad, I said sincerely. I've also been thinking, she twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd noticed years ago. About Thaddeus, about things I've noticed but ignored. I waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. 2 months ago, I found him in his study in the middle of the night. He was grinding something with a mortar and pestle, something that smelled bitter. When I asked what it was, he said it was an herbal supplement to help him sleep. She swallowed hard. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He's a pharmaceutical researcher. It made sense. It's not your fault, I said gently. We see what we expect to see in the people we love. There's more, she continued. Last week, I found a notebook hidden inside one of his medical journals. It had detailed notes about plant toxins, dosages, effects on the human body. When I asked about it, he said it was for a research project. Her eyes met mine, filled with confusion and pain. Quinley, what if he's done this before? What if this wasn't the first time? The question hung in the air between us, too terrible to contemplate, but impossible to ignore. The police are investigating, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. They'll look into his past, his work, his finances. If there's more to this, they'll find it. Evanora nodded, then straightened her shoulders. I've told Detective Hollister everything I just told you, and I've given him permission to search our house. She drew a shaky breath. I also told him about the laboratory Thaddeus set up in our basement last year. He said it was for home experiments, hobby stuff. I never questioned it. You're doing the right thing, I assured her, reaching across to squeeze her hand. This isn't easy for any of us. They told me about the wire, Dom, she said. About you meeting him. Are you sure you want to do this? No, I admitted. But I need to know why, don't you? She nodded slowly. Be careful, he's not the man I thought I married. I'm not sure he ever was. After Evanora left, I remained in the small office, mentally preparing myself for what was to come. In 2 hours, I would face my son, knowing he had tried to kill me. I would wear a wire and try to extract a confession. While officers listened to every word, it felt like a betrayal of everything motherhood was supposed to be. But then, hadn't he betrayed the most fundamental bond? First, Detective Hollister returned with a female officer who would help wire me. As they explained the equipment and process, I found myself thinking of Thaddeus as a child, asking endless questions about how things worked. Some questions, once answered, can never be unasked. Some knowledge, once gained, can never be forgotten. I was about to learn why my son wanted me dead, and nothing would ever be the same again. The police technicians arrived at my house 2 hours before my scheduled meeting with Thaddeus. They moved through the rooms with quiet efficiency, setting up surveillance equipment so discreetly I would never have noticed it myself. Detective Hollister supervised their work, occasionally consulting a floor plan of my home that I'd sketched for him. He'd chosen the living room for our confrontation, an open space with clear sight lines from the windows, where officers would be stationed outside. Remembered, he instructed, as a female technician fitted me with a wire, taping the small microphone to my skin beneath my blouse. You don't need to force a confession, just let him talk. Ask normal questions. Why did he send the cookies? What was in them? Why now after 3 years? I nodded, my mouth too dry for words. The technician gave me a sympathetic smile as she finished her work. You can't see anything, can you? I asked, looking down at myself. Not a thing, she assured me. The wire is completely concealed. Detective Hollister handed me a small receiver for my ear. This lets us communicate with you if necessary. It's practically invisible once it's in place. As I inserted the device, he continued, officers will be stationed here, here, and here. He pointed to locations on the property map. If you need immediate assistance, use the phrase we discussed. Otherwise, try to keep him talking as long as possible. And if he admits to poisoning the cookies, my voice sounded strange to my own ears, detached and calm despite the terror churning inside me. We'll move in and make the arrest, Detective Hollister said. But your safety comes first. If he becomes agitated or you feel threatened in any way, use the signal phrase immediately. I took a deep breath, smoothing my hands over my clothes. How do I look normal? Completely natural, he assured me. Just remember to breathe and try to stay calm. As the technicians completed their work and filed out of the house, Zephyrine arrived. She'd changed out of her lab coat into casual clothes, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. I thought you might want a friendly face nearby, she said, embracing me briefly. I'll be in the surveillance van with Detective Hollister. Thank you, I whispered, grateful beyond words for her presence. The cookie and bottle are securely logged into evidence, she told me, and Meridian is continuing to improve. Evanora is with her. I nodded, relief washing through me at the news of Meridian's recovery. At least my unwitting role in her poisoning wouldn't result in the worst outcome. As the police made their final preparations, I wandered through my house, touching familiar objects, drawing comfort from their solidity. The grandfather clock in the hallway that had belonged to my father, the bookshelf filled with well-worn paperbacks, the small ceramic bowl where I kept my keys. Would these everyday items look different to me after today? Would anything ever look the same? Mrs. Blackwood, Detective Hollister called softly. It's time for us to take our positions. He'll be here in 30 minutes. I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. Remember, Pim, he said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We'll be listening to everything. You're not alone. As they filed out, taking positions around my property, I sank into my favorite armchair and closed my eyes. The house settled into silence around me, familiar creaks and ways that had been the soundtrack of my life for decades. Soon, that silence would be broken by my son's arrival. The son who had sent me poison disguised as a gift. The son who had been my whole world once. I touched the place where the wire lay hidden against my skin and whispered a silent prayer, not for courage, but for understanding. Thaddeus arrived precisely on time. I watched from the living room window as his sleek black car pulled into my driveway, the engine cutting off with surgical precision. He sat motionless behind the wheel for nearly a minute before finally emerging, even from a distance. I could see that he looked immaculate as always, tailored slacks, crisp button-down shirt, not a hair out of place. The perfect picture of a successful professional. Only I noticed the tight set of his shoulders, the calculated deliberation of his movements as he approached my front door. The doorbell rang, an ordinary sound that seemed to echo through the house like a warning. "Remember, we're right here." Detective Hollister's voice came through my earpiece, so faint I almost thought I'd imagined it. I opened the door. Thaddeus stood on my porch, hands at his sides, expression carefully neutral. At 37, he looked like a polished version of his father tone, lean, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that revealed nothing. "Mom," he said, his voice level. "Thank you for seeing me." "Come in," I replied, stepping aside, surprised at how steady I sounded. He entered my home like a visitor, not a son observant, contained, waiting to be directed. I led him to the living room, gesturing to the sofa while I took my armchair across from him. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other. 3 years of silence stretched between us like a chasm neither knew how to cross. "You're upset, Balasayim, Asham," he finally said, his eyes scanning my face with clinical detachment. "Should I not be?" I asked, folding my hands in my lap to hide their trembling. "Meridian is in the hospital. Thaddeus?" A flicker of something annoyance concern crossed his features before disappearing. "Yes," Evanora told me. "Food poisoning, wasn't it?" "Not exactly." I held his gaze. "The doctors found aconitine in her system. Monk's hood poison." He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just tilted his head slightly, like a curious bird. "That's unusual. How would she have ingested something like that?" "The cookies." I said simply, "The ones you sent me for my birthday. The ones I gave to her." Now he did react, a slight tightening around his mouth, a narrowing of his eyes. "Those cookies were for you, Mom. Only you. I made that very clear." "You did," I acknowledged. "You were quite upset when you learned I'd given them away." "Of course I was upset." His voice took on an edge. "I spent hours making them. They were specially crafted for you." "Specially crafted," I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. With monk's hood extract, the silence that followed was absolute. Thaddeus didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me with eyes that seemed to calculate risk and response. "I don't know what you're talking about," Randy finally said, his voice perfectly controlled. "I think you do." I leaned forward slightly. "I kept one cookie, Thaddeus. I had it tested." Another flicker across his face, surprise, quickly masked. "Tested by whom?" "Does it matter?" The results were conclusive. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back, a contained energy radiating from him that I'd never seen before. "This is absurd. You're accusing me of what?" "Exactly trying to poison you, my own mother." "Why now?" I asked, ignoring his denial. "After 3 years of silence, why send me anything at all?" He stopped pacing, his back to me, shoulders rigid. "I wanted to reconnect. Is that so hard to believe?" "With poisoned cookies." He turned, and for a moment, just a moment, his mask slipped. Something cold and calculating looked out from behind his eyes. Something that had always been there, but that I'd never fully seen before. "You found the bottle, didn't you?" he asked softly. "In your trash." My breath caught. In my ear, I heard Detective Hollister's faint voice. "Keep him talking." "Yes," I answered. "I found it." Thaddeus nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "I was careless. I should have taken it with me. You were in my house when, the day before your birthday." He said it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. "You were at the library. You always work Tuesday afternoons. Your spare key is still under the stone turtle by the garden shed." A chill ran through me at the thought of him moving through my empty house, preparing his deadly gift in my own kitchen. "Why, Thaddeus?" I asked. my voice barely above a whisper. What did I ever do to deserve this? He looked at me then, really looked at me, with an expression I couldn't decipher, not hate, not anger, but something more complex, more disturbing. You really don't know, do you? He asked, almost wonderingly. You've never known. Tell me, I said. Help me understand. He sat down again, perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped between his knees. Do you remember when I was 7 and I got so sick? When you took me to the ER with stomach pains? I frowned, casting back through decades of memories. Yes, you had food poisoning. Severe food poisoning. It wasn't food poisoning. His voice was flat. It was lily of the valley. Toxic. I nearly died. What are you talking about? You ate some berries from the... I stopped, the memory suddenly clarifying. From the garden. But that was an accident. You were playing outside and ate them before I could stop you. He laughed, a sound without humor. Is that what you told yourself? Is that what you remember? That's what happened. I insisted, confusion and dread building inside me. No, he said, leaning forward. You made me eat them. You said they were special berries, that they would make me stronger. I stared at him, horrified. Thaddeus, that never happened. I would never. You did. His voice rose for the first time, cracking with emotion. I remember it perfectly. You led me to the garden, picked the berries yourself, and told me to eat them. Then you watched as I got sick. You only took me to the hospital when I couldn't stop vomiting. I shook my head, stunned by the accusation, by the absolute conviction in his voice. That's not true, Bish. It's not what happened. You've always denied it, he said, his voice dropping back to its controlled tone. Every time I brought it up as a child, you said I was misremembering, that I was confused from the fever. But I wasn't confused. Mom, I remember every detail. I struggled to make sense of his words, of the distorted memory he'd carried all these years. Thaddeus, I found you in the garden. You had already eaten the berries. I rushed you to the emergency room immediately. More lies, he said softly. Always lies. Why would I try to poison my own child, I asked, desperate to break through this delusion. Because I wasn't perfect, he answered immediately. Because I made a mess that morning, spilled juice on your favorite tablecloth. You were so angry. The specificity chilled me. He wasn't making this up on the spot. He'd carried this warped version of events for 30 years, nurturing it, building his reality around it. And you think I tried to kill you over spilled juice, I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Not kill, teach a lesson. His eyes were distant now, seeing a past that never existed. You did things like that, small punishments that seemed like accidents. The time my hand was slammed in the car door. The time I fell out in the stairs when you were behind me. Each accusation hit like a physical blow. Ordinary childhood accidents transformed in his mind into deliberate acts of cruelty. Thaddeus, I said carefully, none of that is true. You had accidents, like all children do. I never hurt you deliberately. Never. I knew you'd deny it, he said, oddly calm now. You always have. That's why I needed to show you how it feels, to live with poison inside you. Wondering why someone who should love you would do such a thing. The cookies, I whispered. He nodded. A lesson. Not to kill, just to make you sick. To make you understand what you did to me. A small, terrible smile touched his lips. But you didn't eat them. You gave them away. Like my suffering meant nothing to you. Just like always. In my ear, Detective Hollister's voice was urgent now. We have enough. Use the signal phrase. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. Thaddeus, listen to me. These memories you have, they're not real. Something has distorted them. Perhaps the trauma of being so ill. Don't, he snapped, standing again. Don't tell me what I remember. I've spent my entire life having my reality denied by you. Not anymore. He reached into his pocket, and my heart lurched. "I need to sit down," I said quickly, the signal phrase falling from my lips. But Thaddeus didn't pull out a weapon. Instead, he removed a small vial filled with clear liquid. "I brought this for you," he said, his voice suddenly gentle. A more direct approach, since the cookies failed. "Thaddeus, please." I stood slowly, backing toward the door. "This isn't you. You need help." "This is exactly who I am," he replied. "Who you made me." The front and back doors burst open simultaneously. Detective Hollister led the team through the front, weapon drawn. Police hands where I can see them. Thaddeus didn't resist. He placed the vial carefully on the coffee table and raised his hands, his expression calm, almost relieved. "Thaddeus Blackwood, you're under arrest for attempted murder," Detective Hollister announced, while another officer handcuffed my son. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As they let him out, Thaddeus looked back at me one last time. "Now you know," he said quietly. "Now you finally know how it feels." I watched through the window as they placed him in the back of a police car, his posture perfect even in handcuffs. My son, my only child, a stranger with familiar eyes. Zephyrin found me still standing there, long after the police cars had driven away, watching an empty driveway as the sun began to set. "Quinley," she said gently, "let me take you to the hospital. You shouldn't be alone tonight." I nodded, unable to speak, and let her lead me away from the house that no longer felt like home. In the days that followed, pieces of Thaddeus's life began to surface like debris after a storm. Detective Hollister kept me informed of their findings, each revelation more disturbing than the last. Thaddeus had been researching plant toxins for years, far beyond the scope of his professional work. His home laboratory contained extracts from dozens of poisonous plants, carefully labeled and documented. Most shocking were the journals they found hidden in a false panel in his study wall, years of meticulous entries detailing his distorted memories of childhood, his growing obsession with poisons, and his plans for what he called symmetrical justice. "The psychologists who've reviewed the materials believe your son suffers from a severe delusional disorder," Detective Hollister explained during one of our meetings at the station. "He's constructed an alternate reality where you abused him, and he's spent years planning his revenge." "And could something have triggered this?" I asked, still struggling to understand how my child had developed such a profound break from reality. "Possibly stress, trauma, genetic predisposition. These disorders often emerge from a complex interplay of factors." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else you should know. This may not have been his first attempt." I stared at him, cold dread spreading through me. "What do you mean?" "We found evidence that he may have tried to poison a former colleague 2 years ago, someone who he believed had stolen his research. The man became seriously ill but recovered. The case was never investigated as a poisoning." I closed my eyes, absorbing this new horror. "Will there be more victims we don't know about?" "We're investigating thoroughly," he assured me. "But his journal suggests that you were his primary focus, his ultimate symmetry, as he called it. At St. Luke's, Meridian continued to improve, eventually moving to a regular room and then, a week after the poisoning, receiving clearance to go home. I visited her daily, our shared experience creating a bond stronger than mere friendship. "What will happen to him?" she asked one afternoon as I helped her pack her few belongings for discharge. "Psychiatric evaluation first," I said. "Then likely a trial, though his lawyers are already discussing an insanity plea." She nodded, folding a nightgown with careful movements. "And Evanora? She's filed for divorce." The words still felt strange to say. "She's staying with her sister for now." "And you can," Meridian's eyes, always perceptive, studied my face. "How are you holding up?" I considered the question, one I'd been avoiding even in my own thoughts. "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel like I've been living in one reality while Thaddeus was living in another, and now I don't know which parts of our life together were ever real." Oh, she took my hand, her grip still weak but determined. "The love was real, Quinley." Whatever illness twisted his mind, whatever delusions he developed, your love for him was real. Never doubt that. Tears filled my eyes for the first time since Thaddeus's arrest. I'd been too shocked, too numb to cry until now. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently. If I'd noticed signs earlier, if I'd gotten him help. Stop, Meridian said firmly. This isn't your fault. Mental illness doesn't always announce itself clearly. You were his mother, not his psychiatrist. But I was his mother, I whispered. I should have known. She squeezed my hand. Sometimes the people closest to us are the hardest to see clearly. We look at them through the lens of our love, our hopes, our shared history. Don't torture yourself with what-ifs. As Meridian recovered at home, I threw myself into cooperating with the investigation, providing childhood medical records, photographs, school reports, anything that might help the prosecutors and psychiatric experts understand the progression of Thaddeus's delusions. One rainy afternoon, I met with Dr. Lyra Vega, the forensic psychiatrist assigned to evaluate Thaddeus. She was younger than I expected, with keen eyes and a compassionate manner that put me at ease despite the difficult subject matter. Mrs. Blackwood, she began, I want to be clear that our conversation today is not about assigning blame. I'm trying to understand the development of your son's condition. I nodded, clutching my hands in my lap. I understand. Based on my preliminary evaluation and review of his journals, Thaddeus appears to suffer from what we call delusional disorder, persecutory type. He has constructed an elaborate belief system in which you systematically abused him throughout his childhood. But I didn't, I said, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears after weeks of questioning everything. I believe you, she said gently. There's no evidence to support his claims, and considerable evidence contradicting them. His medical records show normal childhood illnesses and injuries, with no patterns that would trigger abuse investigations. Then why, I asked, the question that had haunted me since that day in my living room. Why does he believe these things happened? Doctor, Vega leaned forward slightly. Delusional disorders often begin with a seed of truth that becomes distorted over time. In Thaddeus's case, the severe poisoning incident when he was 7 appears to be that seed. It was traumatic, frightening, and beyond his understanding as a child. He ate berries from the garden. I said, lily of the valley. I found him vomiting and rushed him to the emergency room. She nodded. That aligns with the medical records. But in Thaddeus's mind, this event has been reframed. Instead of an accident, it became deliberate harm. Once that belief took root, other normal childhood experiences, falls, accidents, disciplinary moments were reinterpreted through this lens. Could it have been prevented, I asked, the question I feared most? Possibly with early intervention, but these disorders can be insidious, developing below the surface for years before manifesting clearly. She hesitated, then added, Thaddeus is highly intelligent, capable of maintaining a facade of normalcy while nurturing these delusions privately. Even those closest to him, his wife. His colleagues saw only glimpses of his true condition. I thought about Evanora, who had lived with him for 7 years without fully recognizing the extent of his illness. About myself, who had raised him from infancy yet somehow missed the distortions growing in his mind. Will he ever get better? I asked, not sure what answer I hoped for. With proper treatment, his condition can be managed. Vega said carefully, but delusional disorders are notoriously difficult to treat, especially when they've been reinforced for decades. The delusions have become fundamental to his identity, his understanding of himself and his past, and his future. That depends on the legal proceedings and the court's determination of his competency. She met my eyes directly. But regardless of the outcome, Thaddeus will need long-term psychiatric care. I nodded, a strange mixture of grief and relief washing over me. Grief for the son I thought I knew, for the life he might have had. Relief that he would finally receive the help he needed, even if it came too late to prevent the damage he'd done. As I left Dr. Vega's office, rain fell in gentle sheets, blurring the world beyond my umbrella. I walked slowly to my car, each step feeling like a decision to continue forward despite everything. My phone chimed with a text from Zephyrin dinner tonight. You shouldn't be alone. I smiled faintly, grateful for the friendship that had deepened through crisis. Yes, thank you. Driving home through the rain-slick streets, I passed the turn that would have taken me to the house Thaddeus shared with Evanora. I wondered if she was there now, packing her belongings, dismantling the life they'd built together. I wondered if she, too, was questioning every memory, every conversation, trying to separate truth from illusion. At a red light, I found myself remembering Thaddeus as a small boy, sitting at our kitchen table, carefully coloring inside the lines, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. Look, Mom, he'd said, holding up his perfect work. No mistakes. The light turned green, and I drove on, tears mingling with rain on my face. 3 months after Thaddeus's arrest, I sat in a courtroom watching as he was declared incompetent to stand trial. The judge ordered him committed to a secure psychiatric facility for treatment, with periodic reevaluations to determine if he would ever be fit for legal proceedings. Thaddeus showed no reaction to the ruling. He sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on some middle distance only he could see. He didn't look at me once during the hearing, though I searched his face repeatedly for any glimpse of the son I had known. Outside the courthouse, Evanora approached me tentatively. Our relationship had shifted to something fragile but genuine in the wake of shared trauma. Are you okay? She asked, her eyes kind beneath the shadow of her hat. I don't know what okay means anymore. I admitted, Zirsha, but I'm surviving. She nodded, understanding in her gaze. The divorce was finalized yesterday. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it, despite everything. I knew she had loved him. Don't be. It's better this way. She hesitated, then added, I'm moving back to Arizona next month. Fresh start. Will you keep in touch? I asked, surprised by how much I wanted her to say yes. Of course, she squeezed my hand briefly. We're still family. Quinley, different than before, but still family. As she walked away, I realized the truth of her words. Family wasn't just blood and legal ties. It was Meridian bringing me soup when I couldn't eat, Zephyrin calling every day to check on me, Detective Hollister still stopping by occasionally to make sure I was safe. Family was who stood by you when the unthinkable happened. That evening, I sat on my porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The garden was beginning to show signs of the coming spring crocuses pushing through the soil, buds forming on the dogwood tree. I had removed the lily of the valley months ago, digging up every last bulb and root. In its place, I'd planted lavender and sage, herbs known for healing and protection. My phone chimed with a text from Meridian Book Club tomorrow, 2 p.m. No excuses. I smiled, typing back, I'll be there. The empty house behind me no longer felt like a reminder of loss, but like a space waiting to be filled with new purpose. I'd been volunteering at a crisis center, using my experience to help others navigate trauma and betrayal. Next week, I would start training to become a victim advocate in the court system. Life would never be the same. The son I raised was gone, perhaps had never truly been who I thought he was. But I was still here, still breathing, still capable of creating meaning from chaos. As darkness fell, I made my way inside, turning on lights as I went. No more sitting in shadows. No more fear of what might be hiding in the dark corners of my life. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, its own grief. But it would come, and I would meet it older, wiser, and no longer alone. In the kitchen, I paused at the refrigerator, where a single photograph was held by a magnet Thaddeus at 5, laughing on a swing, his face alight with simple joy. I touched it gently, honoring the child he had been, mourning the man he became. Then I made myself tea and sat at the table with a notepad, beginning to sketch plans for the community garden I wanted to create at the crisis center, a place of growth and renewal, where poisonous plants would have no home. Outside, wind chimes sang in the evening breeze, a gift from Meridian, hanging where the sound could reach me as I fell asleep. A reminder that beauty could emerge from even the darkest circumstances, if only we had the courage to listen for it. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. Thank you for following my story to the end.